So what I'm going to do now is quit yakety-yakking so much and read some of her poetry. This is my old buddy Tiffany Midge. That's not her here, that's her here. Ta-da! Or up there. There we go. Tiffany Midge. So I'm going to read the first poem, which is called Distracted from COVID-19, page 62. 62. Distracted from COVID-19, attention shifts to MIA Maiden from Land O'Lakes Butter Box. For anybody who doesn't know, this is what happened sometime during COVID. They took the Indian girl off, and now it just says Land O'Lakes. But don't get me started. I'll stand up here and start fussing. I'm going to read her poem. Distracted from COVID-19, attention shifts to MIA Maiden from Land O'Lakes Butterbox. America mourns for the Indian figure who knelt like a supplicant before dairy, fatly blessed our milks, our cheeses, anointed our lands and shores. The Google tutorial surface, the boob trick, score the box, and fold to make a window for her knees to jut through. Oh, our butter maiden brought all the boys to the yard. Twitter sphere, so prostrate with grief, petitions are launched for the dairy princess. Oh, our Pat, oh, Americana, oh, our Dab, oh, Disney-esque, oh, our Dollop, oh, heritage. The mourning procession bears witness. Jolly Green Giant and Chicken of the Sea Mermaid, Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, magically delicious, Leprechaun and Peter Pan, even the Argo cornstarch maiden and Mazola margarine. You call it corn, we call it maize, spokes Indians, raise stalks in solidarity. Mia, aptly named our Butter Girl mascot, the only Indian woman gone missing that anyone notices, anyone cares about. Ooh, man. Whew. Okay, let's read the next one. Indigenous Census Statistics, page 63. I want to show you this just for fun, not that it matters. Now, this is even better. I didn't realize that Mexico, well, of course I knew this. What am I saying I didn't realize? Countries with the largest indigenous populations in the American continent, but Mexico, that's probably one reason why some politicians don't want Mexicans to cross the border. It's because most of them are Indians. Never mind. Stop fussing and read. Indigenous Census Statistics. Approximately 70% of American Indians and Alaskan Natives live in urban areas. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, 2017. 1. 70% of natives live in cities. 2. 62% live in converted lofts with floors refurbished from Midwestern church doors. 3. 19% reside in repurposed urns crafted by Trappist monks. 4. 47% live in tri-level modern industrial condos. 5. 11% live in lighthouses along the eastern seaboard. 6. 35.5% live in narwhal caves. 7. 2% live in hemlock and pine high-rises of northern Idaho. 8. 13% live in subterranean dugouts in Siberia. 9. 5% live in reimagined beehive colonies. 10. 57% live in abstract liminal spaces conjured by soothsayers and druids. I'm not sure what to make of that poem, but I'm not going to comment. I'm just going to keep rolling. Let's do another poem, shall we? This is True Facts, page 67. I was going to read Rewriting the Great American Indian Novel, but we're running out of time, and I always talk too much anyway. Let's read True Facts, page 67. It says here, True fact. Did you know that the Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, and Full Metal Jacket were originally screenplays about American men going into Native American men going into military service? But the producers insisted on whitewashing the characters to appear more universally acceptable for large audiences. The role played by Meryl Streep was originally written as a Lenape woman, but it was decided to make her and the rest of the community Russian Orthodox. True fact. While the old school classics, Whoopee Cushion, Huckleberry, Cream Pie in the Face, are pretty cheesy by today's standards, back in the day they were comedy gold. It was Sitting Bull who originated the Take My Wife Please shtick, and in a 1967 Newsweek interview, the famous king of the one-liners comic Hanny Youngman credits Sitting Bull as being his inspiration for comedy. Sitting Bull was my comedy spirit patronus, Youngman said. True fact. It is not widely known that the legendary Hunkpapa leader, Sitting Bull, I'm going to mess up this name, Tatanka Iotake, was a notorious practical joker. He often pranked Red Cloud during tribal council by placing a whoopee cushion beneath Red Cloud's buffalo robe with hilarious results. But he stole all his best material from the band's Heyoka, Pretty Wallowing Woman, and passed it off as his own. Okay, so there is Tiffany Midge's work called Horns. There's a bunch of really weird, scary, I shouldn't say scary, but morbid stuff in here. She must have written this sometime around Halloween, who knows. But that's that one. Now I'm going to bother you. How we doing on time? 8 minutes and 15 seconds. I want to read this one. This is Drew Hayden Taylor. Let's pull him up so you can see what he looks like. He is a blue-eyed Ojibway, which is the title or subtitle of this book, which I'm going to read from right now. Can you see that? Hope so. There we go. Says here, Drew Hayden Taylor. Funny you don't look like one. Observations from a blue-eyed Ojibway. So, here we go. Just some pages. And again, there is a method to my madness, a reason why I'm doing this to you. It's because I'm trying to get you interested in literature, especially native literature, because you guys don't read enough. All right. Introduction. Pretty like a white boy. In this big, huge world with all its billions and billions of people, it's safe to say that everybody will eventually come across personalities and individuals who will touch them in some peculiar yet poignant way. Characters that in some way represent and help define who you are. I'm no different. Mine is Kermit the Frog. Not just because natives have a long tradition of savoring frogs' legs, but because of this particular frog's music. You all may remember Kermit is quite famous for his rendition of It's Not Easy Being Green. I can relate. If I could sing my song, it would be It's Not Easy Having Blue Eyes in a brown-eyed village. Yes, I'm afraid it's true. The author happens to be a card-carrying Indian. Once you get past the aforementioned eyes, the fair skin, light brown hair, and noticeable lack of cheekbones, there lies the heart and spirit of an Ojibway storyteller. Honest Injun, or as the more politically correct term may be, honest Aboriginal. He's Canadian, by the way. You see, I'm the product of a white father I never knew and an Ojibway woman who evidently couldn't run fast enough. As a kid, I knew I looked a bit different, but then again, all kids are paranoid when it comes to their peers. I had a fairly happy childhood frolicking through the bulrushes, but there were certain things that even then made me notice my unusual appearance. Whenever we played cowboys and Indians, Guess who had to be the bad guy? The cowboy. It wasn't until I left the reserve for the big bad city that I became more aware of the role people expected me to play and the fact that physically I didn't fit in. Everybody seems to have this preconceived idea of how every Indian looked and acted. One guy on my first day of college asked me what kind of horse I preferred. I didn't have the heart to tell him hobby. I've often tried to be philosophical about the whole thing. I have both white and red blood in me. I guess that makes me pink. I am a pink man. Try to imagine this. I'm walking around at any typical reserve in Canada, my head held high, proudly announcing to everyone, I am a pink man. It's a good thing I ran track in school. My pinkness is constantly being pointed out to me over and over again. You don't look Indian. You're not Indian, are you? Really? I got questions like this from both white and native people. For a while, I debated having my status card tattooed on my forehead. And like most insecure people, especially a blue-eyed native writer, I went through a particularly severe identity crisis at one point. In fact, I admit it, one depressing spring evening, I dyed my hair black. Pitch black. The reason for such a dramatic act, you ask? Show business. You see, for the last 8 years or so, I've worked in various capacities in the performing arts, and as a result, I often get calls to be an extra or even try out for an important role in some native-oriented movie. This anonymous voice would phone, having been given my number, and ask if I would be interested in trying out for a movie. Being a naturally ambitious, curious, and greedy young man, I would always readily agree, stardom flashing in my eyes and hunger pains calling from my wallet. A few days later, I would show up for the audition, and that was always an experience. What kind of experience, you ask? Picture this. The movie calls for the casting of the 17th century Mohawk warriors living in a traditional longhouse. The casting director calls my name, Drew Hayden Taylor, and I enter. The casting director, the producer, and the film's director look up and see my face, blue eyes shining in anticipation. I once was described as a slightly chubby beach boy, but even beach boys have tans. Anyway, there'd be a quick flush of confusion, a recheck of the papers, and a hesitant, Mr. Taylor? Then they would ask if I was at the right audition. It was always the same. By the way, I never got any of the parts I tried out for, except for a few anonymous crowd shots. Politics tells me it's because of the way I look. Reality tells me it's probably because I can't act. I'm not sure which is better. It's not just film people either. Recently, I've become quite involved in theater, native theater to be exact. And one cold October day, I was happily attending the Toronto leg of a province-wide tour of my first play, Toronto at Dreamers Rock. The place was sold out. The audience very receptive, and the performance was wonderful. Ironically, one of the actors was also half white. The director later told me he had been talking with that actor's father, an older non-native chap. Evidently, he had asked a few questions about me and how I did my research. This made the director curious, and he asked about the man's interest. He replied, he's got an amazing grasp of the native situation for a white person. Not all these incidents are work-related either. One time, a friend and I were coming out of a rather upscale bar. We were out yuppie watching and managed to catch a cab. We thanked the cab driver for being so comfortably close on such a cold night. He shrugged and nonchalantly talked about knowing what bars to drive around. If you're not careful, all you'll get is drunk Indians. I hiccuped. Another time, the cab driver droned on and on about the government. He started out by criticizing Mulrooney himself and then eventually handling of the Oka crisis. This perked up my ears until he said, if it were for me, I'd have tear gassed the place by the second day. No more problems. He got a dime tip. A few incidents like this, and I'm convinced I'd make a great undercover agent for Native political organizations. But then again, even Native people have been known to look at me with a fair amount of suspicion. Many years ago, when I was a young man, I was working on a documentary on Native culture up in the wilds of northern Ontario. We were at an isolated cabin filming a trapper woman and her kids. This one particular 9-year-old girl seemed to take a shine to me. She followed me around for 2 days, both annoying me and endearing herself to me. But she absolutely refused to believe that I was Indian. The whole film crew tried to tell her, but to no avail. She was certain I was white. Then one day, as I was loading up the car with film equipment, she asked me if I wanted some tea. Being in a hurry, I declined the tea. She immediately smiled with victory, crying out, "See, you're not Indian. All Indians drink tea." Frustrated and a little hurt, I whipped out my status card and showed it to her. Now there I was, standing in a northern Ontario winter, showing my status card to a 9-year-old non-status Indian girl who had no idea what it was. Looking back, this may not have been one of my brighter moves, but I must admit it. It was a Native woman that boiled everything down to one simple sentence. You may know that woman, Marianne Jones from the Beachcombers television series. We were working on a film together out west and we got to gossiping. Eventually, we got around to talking about our respected villages. Her village was on the Queen Charlotte Islands, or Haida Gwaii, as the Haida call them, and mine is in central Ontario. Eventually, childhood on the reserve was being discussed, and I made a comment about the way I look. She studied me for a moment, smiled, and said, "Do you know what the old women in my village would call you?" Hesitant but curious, I shook my head. "They'd say you were pretty like a white boy." To this day, I'm not sure if I still like that. Now, I could keep reading, but I'm running out of time. I probably already went 20 minutes. Let's see. 18 minutes and 46 seconds. Okay, there's this other page on this book. Again, I'm hoping I can tempt you to get some of these books and read them. Check them out at the library if you don't want to buy them. This one is called, on page 64, An Indian by Any Other Name. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing because we're running out of time. An Indian by Any Other Name. Last week, I, a reasonably well-educated man of the ever-increasingly more complex 90s, made a tremendous political and social faux pas. Excuse me. I made the terrible mistake of referring to myself and other people of my ethnic background as Indians. Something's wrong with my voice. Probably because it's time for me to shut up. Back to the book. I made the terrible mistake of referring to myself and other people of my ethnic background as Indians. Oh, the shame of it all! You could hear the gasp echo across the room. It was done, I assure you, in the most innocent of intentions, but nevertheless, I was soon castigated by both my brethren and, in my humble opinion, the overtly politically sensitive members of other native groups. And the white people! Needless to say, in these politically correct times, I was inundated by these people with criticisms about my use of such an outdated term. We, or you, are no longer called Indians, was told to me over and over again. Now, because my voice is going out and I'm coughing, I'm going to stop it there. Oh, man. Coughing so much, my eyes are watering. So, though the reason I'm reading this to you is because I want you to have a look at this kind of stuff on your own and find some of your own favorite native writings. And feel free to share them if you want. Thank you so much for being so patient with me. And we'll see you around. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.